Okay, guys, let's go ahead and get started. So, in today's meeting, we're going to be tackling network traffic analysis. So, generally, anything dealing with the internet is a little bit difficult. So, I kind of wanted to go ahead and take at least half of this meeting dedicated to this topic. And obviously, due to the nature of everything being cloud native now and everything being like a web app, right? It's becoming more and more important to understand how to decipher network-based attacks and stuff like that, right? We could always take a look at host-based attacks and stuff like that, but getting those attacks propagated and just having generally network native attacks is becoming more prevalent. So let's just go ahead and get started. So network traffic analysis is, I kind of defined it as the process of monitoring and studying data moving through a network, okay? And you want to go ahead and monitor those to get an understanding for behavior, right? Like what somebody's doing and maybe why they're doing it. Performance, right? If your network is really slow, despite you having like 10 gigabit links, right? You might want to monitor why your network is being bogged down. And then finally, our focus is security, right? We want to check if there's any sorts of intrusions. We want to double check to see if our network is compromised, okay? So that's kind of the idea of network traffic analysis. It might not be the best the best definition, but that's just kind of like the simple-ish idea of it. And network traffic analysis is kind of the foundation of network forensics in general, right? So forensics is the study of, I would say generally, something happening after it has happened. So kind of, right, something has happened, you don't know why. You would go through the process of forensics to basically reverse engineer what happened, right? So that's, when it comes to network forensics or even in real life, right, the police use crime forensics to figure out why a crime might have happened, stuff like that. So in terms of network forensics, right, understanding network traffic and being able to analyze it is the foundation of figuring out why a network-based attack happened, okay? Additionally, network traffic analysis is the foundation of threat hunting, right? So figuring out where the threat on your network is. And I would say the most, I guess, marketable of all, incident response, right? So it all goes back to that point of, when something has happened, you should be able to kind of backtrack to the source of why it happened, okay? And the bottom line to understand is that network packets don't lie. And no matter how hard attackers try, every single attack has traces, right? Whether it's in logs that we looked at, right? Or it's in network packets, right? And if we capture those packets and we're able to analyze them, then we can definitely determine the attack vector and stuff like that. Okay, so let's get into the fundamentals. So if you guys aren't familiar with the OSI model, I don't particularly remember what OSI stands for, if you guys want to.
Open Systems Interconnection.
Open Systems Interconnection. Okay, thanks, Rahil. Yeah, and so the OSI model kind of, models how systems interconnect. Yeah, that makes sense, right? So it's a 7-layer kind of cake, going from most bare at the bottom all the way up to the most abstracted, I guess is the best way, right? So the higher in the level you are, the more, I guess, like software or just generalization there is. I'm not going to go into too much detail on what the OSI model covers, just because I don't remember it particularly off the top of my head. Like by heart, I could probably sit here for like a minute and then remember it. But in terms of network traffic analysis, though, the layers that we're focused on are between 4 and 7. So those are the ones where you are kind of exchanging information. That's kind of where the focus is. So if you're familiar with the OSI model, you can quickly realize that that's exactly what we're looking at. So if it's applications protocols, right, talking to each other, all the way down to like network level stuff, right, using basic network interfaces, and anywhere in between, right, using TCP protocols, HTTP protocols, FTP. I can throw out all the alphabet soup at you guys, but hopefully you guys can get the idea there. Okay, and then just a basic definition. So two terms you kind of have to know are a packet and a session. So internet traffic is split up into packets, and a packet is basically just a single unit of network interaction or information, I should say. So if I were to send some information from my computer to, let's say, somebody else's, multiple packets would be sent. Obviously, sometimes they can be split up into multiple parts. Sometimes it could be just one big packet. But at the basic level, packets are just single units of network measurement. And then when we get into sessions are basically conversations between hosts, and those are made up of many packets, right? So if I was to download a file from a server, I would be starting a completely new session where I communicate from my computer to the server, and that server is sending me packets, right, of the file information, and I might be sending packets back to confirm that I got them, right, or to verify which ones I have gotten and which ones I haven't gotten yet, in the case of like a multi-part download or maybe even torrenting, stuff like that. So a session is a collection of packets, and packets are single network units. Cool? We're going to get into it, but basically IP packet anatomy is obviously very important to know, right? To understand how a packet is formed, at least on a very, very basic level, you kind of need to know to be able to reconstruct and analyze a network, right? So each packet has tons and tons of data, and depending on what was sent, the data within the packet can change. So first and foremost, the most important are MAC addresses. So MAC is media access control. Basically, it is I don't know if protocol is the best word for it, but it's basically a way of enumerating network connected interfaces.
For Mac, it is ISPRP, address resolution protocol.
You're right, exactly. Yeah. So we'll get into that. What Rahil was saying is that MAC is used in ARP tables to resolve between IP addresses and MAC addresses, which we'll definitely get into. But basically speaking, MAC addresses are just a way of identifying a single network interface. So if I have a Wi-Fi card on my laptop, that Wi-Fi card has a MAC address built into it to signify, who the manufacturer was, and then to serialize my specific Wi-Fi card. And then routers also have their own MAC address. If they have multiple network interfaces, then they're going to have multiple MAC addresses. So if you have a Wi-Fi card built into your laptop, and then if you have a separate Wi-Fi dongle, like through USB, those two are going to have completely different MAC addresses. So the purpose of MAC addresses are just to identify network connected devices. Okay, and we'll get into that. And then another portion of data that packets contain are headers. So that just comes down to information like where's the data coming from, where is it going to, what protocol it's using, so on and so forth. So headers are just miscellaneous structured pieces of information that applications or hosts expect to read to get some kind of background information on the packet. Okay? And then we have the payload. The payload is the actual data that's being transmitted. Right, so again, with that file download analogy, the actual file being transmitted would be in the payload itself. And there's obviously way more data that's in a packet. And like I said, the size of a packet is not constant. It could be one really big packet. It could be a small one. It really depends. Okay, cool. And then moving on from that, we have some key protocols. Just kind of some stuff that you need to know as somebody that is interested in cybersecurity. As a career focus, obviously. So if you're not familiar with most of these, this is an opportunity to get familiar with them. Obviously, the first one we have up there is Ethernet. So Ethernet is a protocol for interconnecting network devices physically, I believe. If I define these incorrectly, feel free to correct me. I'm not going to get upset at all. I'm not the most insanely knowledgeable by any means. But so Ethernet is just a protocol of interconnecting network devices physically, right? So you have a Ethernet cable, also called an RJ45 cable, that you are able to connect between, let's say, router and computer to get internet access, or just network access in general, maybe not internet. Okay, and then ARP, as Rahil talked on. ARP stands for Address Resolution Protocol. So it's basically a protocol for resolving IP addresses. So let's just say, as an example, I send out some information to Google.com or whatever, and then Google.com sends me back information. Okay, but Google.com is going to send it back to me in the form or from like an IP address. But what the ARP table could be used for is to take that IP address and convert it to a MAC address. Technically, you generally don't have like ARP entries for those like WAN connections. Usually ARP entries are for LAN, so local area network connections. So it's just a very easy way to identify hosts by their IP address. It's basically just like a dictionary in Python or a lookup table. You just have a value, which is IP address, you have a key, which is IP address, and you have a value, which is the MAC address. Pretty simple, very powerful protocol in enumerating networks, right? If you have access to an ARP table for a network, you're able to see all of the possible hosts on that network. Okay, and then we have IPv4 and v6, which stands for Internet Protocol version 4 and 6. Should be somewhat familiar with this, at least to some extent. But if you're not, they're just a way of encoding kind of like locations. It's kind of like an address, like a street address. It's written a certain way. So are IP addresses, right? And those are defined by IPv4 and v6. Next, we have TCP, which stands for Transmission Control Protocol. It's a protocol for transmitting data. I'll get into the details of it in just a bit, but it's just basically a protocol of transmitting information. Similarly to TCP, there's also UDP, which is short for User Datagram Protocol, and is just another way of transmitting data over a network. I guess I'll go into it. So we have kind of the bullet points here, the stateful and stateless protocol. What that basically means is, I'll just go with UDP first. UDP is kind of unordered, right? So when I send a UDP packet, I don't expect it to, first of all, get delivered to begin with, right? With TCP, there's no like reliability that it's going to get delivered. But also, if I were to send multiple UDP packets, there's no expectations that they will get to the destination in that same order. So if I send packets 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it could end up at the destination as 3, 4, 5, 2, 1, for example. And so that's what it means by stateless. So there's no sense of order. There's no integrity mechanisms built in. They just kind of either get delivered or they don't. And for that reason, UDP is actually used for internet connections that need to be fast. So think about when you're kind of playing like competitive games, whether it's like Call of Duty, CSGO, whatever, or not CSGO anymore, Counter-Strike just in general. You want to get that information as fast as possible, and that's what UDP does. UDP has smaller packet sizes because of its statelessness, right? Because of its unreliability. Now, on the other hand, TCP is completely different. So TCP is stateful, which means that you have background information on each packet. So when I send a TCP packet, there is an expectation that, one, it'll get delivered, first of all, and second of all, that if it does get delivered, it's going to get delivered in a specific order, right? So, like I said, complete 180 mirror image of UDP. TCP has a state that is important to keep track of. For that reason, TCP packets are generally larger because they contain more data, right? In the sense of which order they should be delivered in, if they were corrupted, right? Some mechanisms to be able to reconstruct the data, that kind of thing. So a use case for TCP, if we go back to that file download use case, right? Generally speaking, we do want to download files as fast as possible, but it's more important for those files to be downloaded correctly, right? They're not corrupted. You don't have any errors when you download it and stuff like that. So generally speaking, downloads are an example of a TCP communication. So yeah, and any service could use one, the other, or both. There's not really any kind of correct way of going about it. Okay, so that's TCP and UDP. Next on the list is ICMP. ICMP is short for Internet Control Message Protocol. Basically, what this protocol is it defines how internet connected services communicate with each other. So if you've ever done a ping on a computer, then you've done an ICMP protocol usage, right? So you are basically using this protocol to denote how you as the source should message another host as the destination. So you can kind of decipher it from the name, right? It's just how internet-connected devices message each other. Just an easy way of understanding that. Okay. Next, finally, we have DNS. DNS stands for Domain Name System. Very simply, obviously, a lot of our network infrastructure is based around IP addresses. The problem is IP addresses can be kind of annoying to remember, right? They're just seemingly random numbers. And so DNS is a protocol that serves to alleviate that pain point by offering named addresses, right? So, for example, google.com, that's a domain name, okay? If we type google.com, we're not actually going to google.com. What we're doing is we're asking the DNS server, hey, I want to go to google.com. What's google.com's IP address? It gives us back that IP address, and we go to that IP address instead. We don't go to google.com, if that makes sense. We could actually probably look up what the IP address of google.com is. So if I look up just a who is for google.com, and so we should, okay, maybe not this one. Let's try this one. Kind of slow. Let's try this other website. Nice. Okay, google.com. Okay, interesting. Let's just look up google.com public IP. Okay, well, this is not exactly what I meant at all. Okay, whatever. The point is, it's just a protocol that allows us to translate word, like named addresses like google.com or csulb.edu into IP addresses which the networks use.
Using the terminal?
One more time?
If you will ping the
Oh, yeah.
Google.com terminal,
True. Yes.
you will directly give the public IP.
You are correct. Yes, if I use the terminal. See, that's why I have you guys here. Remind me of stupid stuff like that. Yeah, so if I go ahead and ping google.com, so this is a ICMP protocol, but it's not just an ICMP protocol. Obviously, I'm able to ping google.com, which is not an IP address, right? This domain name gets resolved right here. So this particularly is the IP address for the Los Angeles Google database. So you could you could see here LAX, right, for the Los Angeles International Airport. And yeah, so you could see the IP address for google.com. Okay, this implies that one domain name can actually point to many IP addresses, which is completely true. I'm not going to get into it, but something interesting that you could look up are stuff like top-level domains and subdomains to be able to kind of get a little bit deeper into that kind of topic. So, yeah. Okay, cool. So that's just kind of some key protocols to remember. Obviously, these aren't all of them. These are just the ones that I kind of remembered off the top of my head. Okay, and with that, obviously, comes some key ports for those same protocols. So some important ones are going to be HTTP and HTTPS on port 80 and 443. We also have DNS, which is on port 53, and FTP as an example on port 21. Okay, obviously, some protocols have a specified port to talk on. Some don't. It just depends on where in the OSI model they sit on. Okay, cool. So those are just kind of some of the fundamentals. Let me zoom out a little bit. Any kind of questions on those before I move on? Maybe if I glossed over something, maybe you want to talk about it really quickly. Cool. Okay, any comments before I move on? Anything of note that you might want to add, maybe? Okay, cool. Sounds good. Okay, so let's move on. So generally speaking, we're kind of getting into the territory in these meetings where we go over some kind of complicated tools. So before they weren't too complicated, right? We only got complicated once we got into the password cracking region. But moving forward, they get a little bit more complex and require a little bit of know-how on how to use. Okay, so let me zoom in here on these tools here. And again, obviously, just like with the protocols, these aren't all the possible tools you could use for network traffic analysis, but these are just kind of some of the main ones. And the first one here is TCP dump. So TCP dump is kind of like the backbone of this particular area of study. It's a command line packet capture tool. Excuse me. I could probably just launch Kali here in the meantime while I kind of describe these so I can bring them up. But yeah, so it's a command line tool, so it's not as easy to use as some of the other tools we have on this list, but it's very extensible, but it's also very extensive, if that makes sense. Extensible in the sense that you can kind of make it to do a lot of different things, and extensive in the sense that there are many different options for running this command, right? Well, once I get my virtual machine here running, we can take a look at the man page for it. Okay, and then the next tool we have on there is Wireshark. So Wireshark is just kind of like it's a GUI tool for packet capture, but it's also a tool for deep analysis and visualization, which we'll kind of take a look at in just a second here. But Wireshark is kind of like I wouldn't say the most important, but it's kind of like the main tool for this particular area of study, right? So Wireshark is kind of like a all-in-one tool where you can both capture packets, but also analyze them as well, right? So you can follow conversations, you can visualize different protocols, right? So if you're having a lot of a specific protocol, you're able to see it through Wireshark. it'll help out with your analysis. Let me have TCP dump pulled up here. Okay, so here's my Kali Linux, if I can full screen it. And so let's just take a look at the man page for TCP dump here. And we could see that we have quite a few options here. Feel free to go through them on your own if you'd wish. But yeah, there's just so many different options that you could have on a TCP dump here. And then for Wireshark, let me go ahead and open that up. Here we go. Like I said, a GUI tool that allows us to capture packets here. I'm going to go ahead and just open up a capture here on my quote-unquote Ethernet here. And it looks like for this particular one, it's running a spanning tree, which is a protocol, I believe, primarily used by Cisco devices to enumerate a network. I might be wrong, though. Feel free to correct me. But just in this simple packet capture, you can kind of see some of the information being sent to my device and out from my device as well. So we have a source, right, where it's coming from, destination, where it's going to, the protocol, and the actual packet information. And we also have the hexadecimal representation for it as well right here. Okay, so very, very useful. But we also have some stuff at the top here. So if I just open up the statistics drop down, we could see just how many options we have in terms of visualization. Let's just take a look at, I don't know, this IPv4 statistics, for example. So we could see here, right, we could see a particular IP address, particular IP addresses, I should say, how much information they've sent, and so stuff like that. I believe there's more visualization potential with Wireshark. I'm not going to get too deep into it just because you can kind of look at it on your own if you'd wish. And we'll probably get into it once we do some of the exercises here. Okay, and then next we have Zeek. So Zeek is what's called an intrusion detection system, and it's a tool used for detailed logging. Okay, but it's kind of an all-in-one kind of tool where, in addition to logging, you can use it for network forensics, right? And this is what I meant in kind of some of our previous meetings, where a lot of these topics kind of blend into each other. This is kind of an example where kind of log analysis and network traffic analysis blend together as kind of one super topic here. So if I can pull up Zeek here. Zeek IDS. IDS is intrusion detection system. Cool. Maybe if I go to the images instead, might be a little bit more helpful. So as you can see here, just a simple dashboard demonstrating network usage, resource utilization, stuff like that. I believe this is a commercial product. Again, feel free to correct me on that. But I don't think you can use this unless you pay for it. Which kind of transitions us into our next tool, which is Snort. Snort, on the other hand, is free to use, and it is also an intrusion detection system. The difference between Zeek and Snort, Zeek is kind of for forensics, which means you are detecting intrusions after they have happened, right, by looking at logs, whereas Snort, as you can see here, focuses on immediate threats. So it kind of scans for suspicious activity. I really like the logo for this for this program. It's just a pig with a big nose. I don't know, I find it funny. But yeah, let's take a look at what that'll look like. So this is not actually a screenshot of Snort itself. This is a screenshot of Graylog, which is a log aggregation system or program, however you want to call it. But Graylog, as you can see here, is able to display the information that Snort puts out. So we see here we have a metric for failed SSH logins. We have a metric for Snort alerts. We also have this map where stuff could be coming from. We also have, let me zoom in here, top attacks. And sorry, I keep zooming in and out. I can't get it correctly. And where they're coming from, right? So Snort primarily focuses on stuff that is happening nearly immediately, right? Immediate threats, stuff that's happening right here, right now, whereas Zeek focuses on log analysis to determine an intrusion. Okay, and again, this doesn't encapsulate all of the possible tools, just kind of some of the more general ones. Hopefully that makes some sense. Okay, cool. So any questions on the tools at all that we covered? If you wanted to add one that you know maybe that kind of fits into this category, let me know as well. But yeah, any questions, comments, or concerns before I move on? Okay. All right, sounds good. Okay, so let's move on to the next section here, patterns to look out for. Right, so I believe we took a look at this in the log analysis here. Right, when we're analyzing anything, then we're trying to figure out some kind of pattern to look for. And I have some of them enumerated here. Okay, so the first one here is command and control / beaconing. Okay, so command and control is the idea behind kind of ratting someone, right? So remote access tool, that's what RAT stands for, or remote access Trojan, as I have it here. Basically, once an attacker has access to a computer, command and control is how they're able to communicate to that computer to tell it what to do, right? And so some patterns to look out for are going to be regular, small outbound connections at a consistent interval, right? So this is what's called beaconing, okay? So this is just our computer as a botnet victim. Maybe not a botnet, but just in general, as a victim. It's regularly connecting to some server and telling it that we are still alive, right? We're ready to take commands. So that's kind of a pattern to kind of look out for. Additionally, right, when it comes to command and control, I don't have it here, but also likewise regular inbound connections as well, right? If we are actively being commanded to do something on our system, then we are getting information from some central server telling us to do stuff. Now, the problem with that is sometimes firewalls will block that activity. And so what you instead have to do is look at the response from an outbound connection, right? So for example, I make a request to a server, that server will process my request and respond back with some information. And in that response, it could tell my computer like, okay, I have my botnet hacking, csulb.edu, go ahead and join in, right? So it's not necessarily just inbound or just outbound. It's going to depend on the specific environment. Okay, and the way that we investigate this kind of threat is to obviously identify the domain, right? Who is being connected to, right? Are they some random domain or some random IP that just kind of exists, right? It's a random AWS server or something like that. Check who is, right? So check who actually owns that domain or that IP address. You're also going to want to examine headers, right? We talked about headers. Sometimes they transmit stuff like API keys or like just secrets in general that a command and control center could use to determine if you are a legitimate victim or if you're just kind of like a honeypot trying to figure out what's going on with the system. And then finally, to obviously note down interval, right? If it's happening very frequently, figuring out when it happens, right? Let's say every minute or every 5 seconds, or every 30 minutes, right? Noting down that interval is very important because you're able to, and we'll touch on this later, detect stuff statistically. And as I already touched on, this kind of this forensic category is used for botnets, right? So if you are part of a larger network of infected computers that are used for stuff like DDoS attacks, as well as RAT, so remote access Trojan, or remote access Trojan, or remote access toolkit, however it is you want to call it. Basically, it's a program that allows an attacker to have remote access of your computer. So those two are going to be checking in with a central server and receiving commands. Additionally, though, similarly is data extraction. We're going to see a lot of this in these kind of patterns, but this idea of data extraction. I want you guys to kind of pay attention to these because I think it's very interesting to see how attackers are able to engineer a way to get data out of a protected network without being detected. And we'll talk on that in a little bit. So obviously in this case at least, the way that data is extracted is obviously small bits of sensitive data at a time, right? It's sent out periodically to avoid detection, right? If we send out entire files at a time, it's going to be super duper easy to determine that this is some sort of data exfiltration going on, versus if we send out like maybe 8 bytes of it at a time, like every 10 seconds or every minute, it's going to be a little bit harder to detect. Okay, and then obviously with these sorts of attacks, right, especially when we're communicating over encrypted channels like HTTPS, they are encrypted, right? But the thing is, because of the nature of this kind of attack, it can be detected statistically, right? And that's why we have to note down the interval, right? There is a certain level to where I guess a network packet is just coming in too often or not too often, right? If I have a bunch of users accessing google.com a lot, like every half a second, that's completely normal, right? Google.com is a very, very popular service provider. But if I have a bunch of users connecting to like 45.134. blah, 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 whatever, like a bunch of times over and over again, it's kind of weird, right? And so even if we're not able to determine what is actually being transmitted because it's all encrypted, we could probably detect that it's some sort of malicious activity statistically, right? So just something to note there. Okay. Next, we have another pattern to look out for is DNS tunneling, which is kind of another form of exfiltration. This is actually super duper cool. Super interesting, I should say. Maybe not cool, but super interesting. And basically the way that DNS tunneling works is you're abusing DNS to kind of exfiltrate data out of a network. And the reason why you would want to use DNS is because it's rarely blocked, right? Nobody wants to connect to services using their IP address. So having some form of DNS is going to always be a thing, right? So it's very rarely blocked. And another thing, you don't actually need a direct connection to the server to be able to carry out kind of exfiltration. And then finally, another thing is you can actually carry plain text over DNS, right? With other protocols, you're going to need to kind of encode it, whether it's base 64 or if you're not hashing it, if you're converting your information to just general bytes. You're going to need to do that conversion when you send it out, and then when you receive that data, you need to unconvert it back to the original state. But with DNS, you could actually send out plain text. Okay, and so what should you kind of look out for? The thing that you want to look out for is going to be long domain or subdomain queries, okay? And frequently at that. So just as an example, right, let me make this a little bit bigger. Okay, so let's say I have this server, example.com, right? This is an actual website that I own, obviously. But what I could do is I can abuse DNS to actually send information to my server without actually sending information to the server. And the way that I could do that is by exploiting subdomains. So just an example, obviously we have like www.example.com, but you might have also seen kind of subdomains like auth or maybe API, for example. These are part of the DNS protocol. So what I could actually do when I give these subdomains. So for example, let's just say I go to api.example.com. What this is going to do is it's going to go to example.com and it's going to say, hey, do you have a subdomain called API? Example.com is going to process that request and it's going to tell me whether it does or it doesn't. Okay, but example.com, right, my server gets that request regardless. So what I could do is I could actually send an encoded piece of information. So let's get a really quick example of this. So let me just go ahead and base64 encode something really quickly. And let's just say, I don't know, super secret password here. Okay, so here's this piece of plain text. What I could do is I can then attach this in the subdomain of the website that I'm reaching, and what's going to happen is my website is going to look at the subdomain. It's going to extract the information from the subdomain, right? Keep track of it, but ultimately what it's going to do is it's going to say, oh, actually that subdomain doesn't exist, and your network is going to be none the wiser. Okay, so that's just kind of an example of some DNS tunneling. So the thing that you want to look out for is going to be long DNS queries, right? So anything which has like a bunch of data like in here, right? So like if I have this giant piece of text in here, right? This doesn't look right. There's no normal website that has that. Generally speaking, you could maybe possibly have a server where you have a secret subdomain, like maybe for a dashboard that you don't explicitly want like record on the internet, right? So you might hide it, might obfuscate it by putting it under this kind of long string of text. But generally speaking, this is very, very abnormal. So if you see somebody reaching out to a host with this domain, it's probably some form of DNS tunneling. Okay, so another thing you want to look out for is encodings in general, right? So it's obviously kind of hard for the human brain to specifically pick out any particular encoding, but again, you just kind of want to look for abnormal information in this domain, right? And if it looks abnormal, you might want to maybe try to decode it using one of the popular encoding schemas and see if maybe it's some critical piece of information that's being sent out. Okay, and another thing you want to look out for is these right here. So I did touch on how we might go to example.com with this subdomain. That example.com is going to get that query, store the information, and then it's going to return this right here, either NX domain, right, non-existent domain, right? It's basically saying like, no, this domain doesn't exist, fail, right? Or it's going to send back a text response, right? Whether it's like, good, okay, whatever, which is generally speaking not normal, right? Whenever we send a request, you're expecting kind of some other forms of information, right? So if, for example, if I'm constantly querying example.com, but the subdomain is different, and I keep getting NX domain over and over and over and over again, it's probably some DNS tunneling happening. Okay, it's just kind of very interesting, right? I didn't know this until recently. Super, super cool and unintuitive way of thinking how you can kind of get past a secured network. And so, how would you investigate this kind of attack? Well, obviously, you're going to want to look for long subdomains, like we just looked at. You're going to want to look for many, many queries to the same domain, right? So, example.com is the domain. Subdomain is this long string of text in front of it, right? So, if I have many queries to example.com, but it's all different subdomains, right? That's going to look suspicious. You're also going to want to analyze the responses, right? Like I said, look at the NX domain, look for unnormal responses. You're also going to want to look for unusual characters or encodings, right? We kind of looked at it here. Like, generally speaking, this character right here is not present in domains, and same thing with the caret, right? It's not generally present there. So these kind of unusual characters point to some form of encoding, and so that's why you kind of want to be on the lookout for any unusual stuff. Okay, and in addition to data exfiltration, like I just said, this is also used for command and control, right? So if I have a zombie host, like my laptop here that's infected, if I query, abcdefg.example.com and it responds back with a text response telling me what to do next, right? Oh, I want you to do a DDoS attack on, csulb.edu. Right, still very useful. And then also the main kind of thing here is bypassing firewalls. So firewalls are very, very kind of powerful these days. So and usually the configurations are correct, generally speaking. Using DNS tunneling is one way that you can bypass the firewall altogether. Okay, cool. I actually wanted to just have like a really brief discussion on this topic. What do you guys think? Have you guys ever heard of DNS tunneling before at all?
I know what about it.
No?
There's a tool in Kali called IOD, which is used for DNS tunneling.
Oh yeah, really? There's a tool in Kali.
It's very short.
What about you guys on the Discord? Ever heard of this method at all?
I've heard of it, but I have no experience with it. I have no experience with it, but I know Cyber Patriot had a challenge where it would you would have to detect it in a sandbox. Wasn't the one that did that.
Yeah, exactly. Right. In anything that I have here is obviously somewhat relevant to our competition, so we're obviously going to see probably some form of this maybe in the competition. You had something to say, Roby, or sorry to cut you off?
Oh no, it's a keybind. My bad.
For sure.
It like unmutes every now and then.
All good, all good.
So,
My boss said exploit domain technique with DNS tunneling. For example, when you go to some hotel where you need authentication for connecting to the Wi-Fi, right? After you connect, there is an HTML page where you log in. Using DNS tunneling, you can bypass that thing.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, so Rahil was saying that if you ever go to kind of like a network, like a hotel or something, where you have access to the Wi-Fi, but you need to authenticate yourself, right? You need to give them your fucking personal information so they can sell it to whoever. One way you could bypass that, as he was saying, is DNS tunneling. So very interesting.
He told me a technique where you can scan for the DNS tunneling if it is possible or not. That if you connect to the Wi-Fi but you are not still logged in, you can try pinging the DNS.
I see.
If it is pinging, then it is possible to do the DNS tunneling.
That's cool. Nice. Yeah, so obviously this is not an antiquated technique. This is still very much used for the very reason that DNS is very rarely blocked, right? This is still an active technique that's being used, even though it's kind of easy to detect. But yeah, we'll kind of see as we go through these that these are just kind of, there's so many ways to exfiltrate data that's constantly being invented or kind of being improved upon. Yeah, it's just super interesting. Hopefully you guys can share my enthusiasm here in just how kind of interesting just at least this topic of being able to bypass complicated systems that are used for detecting this, right? So this is something that you could very realistically use like nowadays if you were to go rogue and start hacking. Okay, cool. Let's move on. Large data exfiltration, right? So up until this point, we've kind of been talking about kind of small forms of data exfiltration, right? Either the DNS tunneling, or these small kind of bits of sensitive data being sent out. But what if we have gigabytes or terabytes of information being sent out? Like, it would just take way too long to exfiltrate that data. Okay, and so some use cases here are for extracting entire databases, source code, and so on from compromised systems, right? So these kinds of information sources are usually very, very packed with information and usually very large. Okay, so obviously attackers are going to want to try to get that information out as fast as possible. Okay, and so the pattern you're going to want to look for is like unusually large outbound posts, right? So post is a HTTP method for sending information. Now, whenever you make a post request, you are generally speaking just sending some form of information to the server. So like whenever you're logging in and you send your username and password, generally speaking, that's a post method, okay? Or if you're uploading a file, right, that's also like a post. Or, it could be a patch, it could be a put. There's a bunch of different methods, and the specific use cases of them are a little bit different. But generally speaking, post is an HTTP method for sending data somewhere. And while some of them can be pretty big, you kind of want to look out for posts that are unusually large, right? If you have a post that's like several megabytes in size, maybe it's on the side of normal-ish, but generally speaking, a single request shouldn't be that large, right? Especially if we get into the tens of hundreds of megabytes. While it's still possible to have legitimate traffic that's that big, it's generally speaking very unusual. Okay, cool. The other thing you want to look out for is file transfer sessions, right? So we talked about FTP, right? File transfer protocol, right? You want to look for sessions where that's happening, right? And you're able to do stuff like that with using Wireshark. Okay. Another protocol here that I have here is SMB. I don't remember exactly what it stands for, but it's the it's like the Windows like network file system protocol, right? So it's just a way of enumerating network attached storage on a network. So for example, let's say I have laptop A and laptop B. If I connect them using the SMB protocol, I'm able to share files back and forth on the network without actually directly connecting them, like through a USB or something like that. Okay, so file transfer sessions. Now, how would you investigate this kind of attack? So the main thing you're going to want to look out for is large content length headers. So content length is a header that tells the receiving side of your request what, like, in terms of length for the actual request, like what to look out for. So if you're seeing content lengths of megabytes in the tens of hundreds, like I said, it's very unusual. And even if you can't directly count easily the size of an individual session, you could at least take a look at the content length header to see how big the combined packets are going to be, if that makes sense. I'll touch on that in a second here in the multi-part. Basically, right, I did say that sessions are a collection of packets, and packets are the individual unit. I could have a request split up into multiple different packets, right? And in one of those packets, I can define a header for content length, which tells my destination how big to expect, or sorry, how much data to expect, right? So even though the individual packets might be small, them all together might be really big. So you want to look out for that kind of header, if that makes sense. Okay. Additionally, multi-part uploads. That just goes with the file transfer, right? So with file transfer comes multi-part uploads. Okay. Another thing you're going to want to look for is following streams. So this is possible in Wireshark. Let me see if I have any TCP streams that I can maybe possibly follow. Let me just go to Firefox here. And let's scroll all the way down here. Okay, so let's just go to google.com. Google.com. It's just an example. And if I scroll near the bottom, now I'm having a lot more network traffic now that I'm browsing the internet and stuff like that. But this is probably related to what I'm trying to do here. So if I go right click on this TCP, follow TCP stream, and we could take a look at the response. So you can see here on the bottom left, client, that's going to be us. So this is what we sent out. And then server is going to be what was responded. Now, obviously, this is encrypted, so it's just a bunch of garbage going on here. But we could at least see some information here, like play.google.com. Let's see, anything else here? Not really much else. But yeah, so using tools like this to be able to follow the stream, right? So you could see here that my client made this initial request to google.com. Then Google went ahead and responded. This is probably the entirety of the HTML document here. So it responded with the HTML document. This is probably another request for some additional files, like maybe a JavaScript file or a CSS file, and it sends those over, so on and so forth. So you can follow the TCP streams now. Not TCP, I should say. You can follow the streams of data in general. So FTP, TCP, UDP, HTTP, anytime there's a kind of a stream of data, you're able to follow it in tools like Wireshark. Generally, though, it's going to be a lot of garbage, especially if it's encrypted. Okay, cool. Back to this. So you're going to want to follow streams, and you're going to want to check for sensitive data. Now, if it's encrypted, it's not going to be the easiest to figure out if there's sensitive data. Obviously, you would really only follow streams if it's not encrypted, which generally speaking is not really a thing anymore. It's just so easy to encrypt stuff. Okay. Another thing you're going to want to look out for is large write operations from FTP or SMB, right? So these protocols that do file transfers, you're going to want to look for large operations where you're writing data, writing as in sending out data, right? If you're doing a lot of a particular operation, right, it's generally kind of a little bit suspicious. You're going to want to maybe look at what's going on there. Okay, so large data exfiltration, right? There's a lot of different techniques for using it. This is probably a more antiquated way of doing it. Okay, moving on to lateral movement. Okay, so lateral movement is the idea where once attackers are inside a network, right? Let's say they're on one host. Lateral movement is the idea of spreading out to as many systems as possible, right? So obviously it boils down to both persistence, right? Staying on the network for a long time, but also privilege escalation, right? If I'm already inside the network, it might be much easier to attack an admin account from inside the network rather than from outside, okay? So lateral movement is, generally speaking, kind of one of the main things that attackers or malware are going to be performing to be able to stay on the network and to be able to get more privileged access to the network resources. Okay, and so the thing that you're going to want to look out for is checking to see if an internal host is connecting to too many other internal hosts, right? So if my laptop at 192.168.0.10 is connecting to .10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, whatever, if it's connecting to a bunch of hosts and those hosts aren't connecting to me back, it's a little bit weird, right? Unless you know who that host is, right? If it's like a network administrator's computer, right? Maybe it's a little bit less weird, but still something that you might want to take a look at. Now, we also have this RDP or SMB. RDP is Remote Desktop Protocol. It's Microsoft's protocol for remote desktop. Think like TeamViewer, AnyDesk, right? Stuff like that. So obviously, if a host is connecting to a bunch of other hosts and they're trying to do it over these protocols that allow you to take control of a computer, for sure. Obviously, it's going to be a little bit concerning, right? Why does one host want to connect to so many different ones and gain that level of access to them? Looks a little bit suspicious. Okay, and so obviously to investigate that kind of attack, you're going to want to look for those same protocols, right? Look out for RDP and SMB attacks. You're going to want to track conversations and look for too many unique destinations, right? And what I mean by track conversations, I mean follow the streams, right? You're going to want to see, if one host is just continuously talking to the same other host, for example. Additionally, you're going to want to identify logon events, right? If a attacker is trying to infiltrate other accounts, they're going to try to log on to them. Whether it's successful or not, you're going to want to look out for those events as well. And so, like I said, lateral movement is used for privileged escalation, so trying to access more privileged admin accounts. Persistence, right? If you spread across a network, it's much harder to be able to get detected. And then finally, credentials. So even if you're not able to get into the actual systems, you're at least, if you're even on unprivileged systems, it's possible that they could still hold valuable information, right? So for example, think a customer service representative at a company, right? Generally speaking, they're not going to be the most privileged. However, they do have access to user accounts, right? Generally speaking, they do need to be able to verify information to access those accounts, right? That's why they ask you for your birth date or the last four of your social, right? They can't access it without that information, right? But still, right, if an attacker has access to that computer and once a customer has authenticated themselves, now the attacker has access to that information as well. So even if they don't have access to the underlying database of all the information, they have access to a computer that can, right? Hopefully that makes a little bit of sense. Okay, cool. And then we move on to reconnaissance. So reconnaissance is like we talked about in open source intelligence, is just a way of mapping out a network, right? So you're going to want to look for finding open ports and services and stuff like that before you do any actual attacking, right? This is just listing stuff out. Okay, so the pattern there is to look for SYN, which is sync packets to too many ports or too many hosts. And likewise, if you're investigating, look for those too many SYNs without acknowledgements. Look for sequential ports and IP scans, right? So if a host is scanning port 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, it looks a little bit suspicious. Or if they're like pinging the most common, right? 80, then 443, then 21, then 22, so on and so forth, looks a little bit suspicious. So reconnaissance is another piece of network traffic that you want to look out for. Almost just as much as the attack itself, right? It's just as important to know whether somebody is, let's say, at your house, right? It's just as important to know if somebody's scoping out your house to rob it than it is to actually like defend your house against the robber, right? Because if you know that somebody's tracking your house, you're able to take measures defending against it, right? Same thing here in the network sense. Okay, and then generally here, I have suspicious traffic. This is just kind of like a general one. Obviously, everything that we talked about here is suspicious traffic, but these are just kind of ones that you should maybe look out for. So obviously, traffic that doesn't necessarily follow normal usage or protocols for a given host or subnetwork. Okay, so for example, you're going to want to look for unexpected protocols on hosts that never use them, right? So for example, let's say I have that customer service representative computer, right? Generally speaking, customer service representatives aren't probably going to be doing any, if at all, many, if any at all, FTP protocols, right? So if you're seeing FTP protocols coming in from a customer service rep or a very low level associate, you'd probably want to take a look at that, right? Maybe ask them like what they're doing. Maybe it's not malicious. Maybe they just have access to a system that they're not supposed to, right? By accident. Okay. Another thing is strange packet sizes. So generally speaking, if it's something is too big or too small or if there's too much variance in packet sizes, right? Those are just some things that you want to look out for. Okay, and like I said, so unusual packet sizes. Look out for missing headers. So this is another thing. Before I kind of move on, when I'm talking about suspicious traffic and traffic that doesn't follow normal usage, what I mean is that generally speaking, network and internet communication is generally standardized, right? So there's a specific way that you're supposed to be using the internet, specific way that you're supposed to be talking to other computers on the host, and if you're not following that, you just look weird. Okay, so for example, when I touched on the post method here. So post is used when you want to send data, right? There's another method called get. Get is for when you want to receive data, okay? Now, there's nothing stopping you from using the get method as a post, right? So if I have a get method and I'm sending data on it, it's just weird. Like, why are you doing that? Either the application that the user is using was coded poorly, or right, it's an unauthorized program that's trying to evade our intrusion detection, right? So look out for unusual traffic like that, where they just don't follow rules or standardizations. Okay, and I shouldn't say rules. I should just say standardizations, just because if you're able to do something right, even if it's not the normal way to do it, that doesn't mean it's against the rules. It's just a different way of doing it. It's just stuff is standardized for a reason. Okay, so yeah, and obviously, so check out for missing headers. So for example, if we're seeing a lot of like HTTP traffic from a specific host, right? Usually, a host, when they do send that HTTP traffic, they're sending a lot of headers with that. So let's take a quick look at here, for example. If I go into the inspect, just take a look at just some headers, for example. So let's resend it. Okay, so this initial post here. So if I go to the request, or maybe this one instead. Any of these? Let me see. Oh wait, I just needed to scroll down. I'm stupid. Okay, so this request header. So these are headers that my Firefox is sending out. So you could see here, I'm accepting any HTML documents. I'm accepting anything in the English language. Here are some cookies I'm sending out, stuff like that. So if I'm sending an HTTP request and I'm not sending out like a user agent header, for example, which says what kind of client I am running this request on, that's kind of weird, right? That maybe goes to show that maybe the HTTP traffic is not exactly legitimate, right? Maybe just something to look at. Or, right, likewise here, if it doesn't have any accept headers. Likewise with the response as well. Look out for any kind of unusual headers. Anything with this X in front, see how it says X, Firefox SPDY? Anything with X in the front is a custom header. So that's something that you could look at as well, right? If you see any custom headers with some suspicious information, you could look at that as well. Okay, cool. And so that's missing headers, and then obviously malformed packets. This just goes back to if you're sending information in an incorrect way. So maybe you're not using HTTP, maybe you're sending the packets directly via a more unabstracted protocol, right? If I'm sending direct TCP or UDP packets, right, not using a abstracted protocol, right, we want to look out for if those if those packets are malformed, if they're in a form they're not intended to be. Okay, so again, missing headers, or if the data's a little bit scrambled up, all of these can kind of point towards something kind of weird going on. Okay, and obviously with all of these, they have all the same use cases, but at least with suspicious traffic, the main use case is evasion, right? If we are trying to fake legitimate network traffic, what we're trying to do is avoid detection, right? So if detection systems are expecting like normal packets, if we kind of fake them a little bit, then we can kind of evade those detection mechanisms. Okay, and then obviously hiding data, right? So if a packet is unusually formed, it could be that there is some data hidden in there, right? For data exfiltration, for example. Another thing, another cool one is recon, right? So for reconnaissance, if I, as an attacker, am trying to figure out if a web server is exploitable or not, what I might do is I might send an obviously wrong packet to a server, and then when it responds in a unexpected way, I could possibly use that to trigger some sort of exploit, right? It could show that maybe that there's something that I could exploit there to gain access to the server. Okay, cool. So suspicious activity. Any kind of questions on these? I know we kind of covered a lot here, but yeah, any kind of questions on any of these like network traffic patterns that I can maybe answer? I'll just kind of have them listed out here for you guys to look at. Let me know, or if there are any comments or concerns as well. Okay, sounds good. Okay, and so last thing that I wanted to kind of showcase here is directly relevant to packet capture. I'm going to have this in the notes, but let me just paste it in the Discord as well, just because why not? If you wanted access to some practice packet information, these are some good resources for you to use. Actually, let me paste it in the main chat under a new thread. Let me do that really quickly. Yeah, so obviously when you're learning Wireshark, it's kind of hard to maybe not just Wireshark. When you're really learning any packet capture tool, it's a little bit hard to find packet files, I guess, to analyze. The resources that I'm attaching allow you to be able to get access to nearly legitimate network traffic that you can analyze for anything that might be misconfigured, malformed, stuff like that. So let me do NCL 2025 meeting 3. Okay, there we go. So yeah, so go ahead and take a look at that thread that I just started. One of those links is actually this APackets link that I'm going to throw up on the right side here. 8packets, looks like it might have been deleted. It's a website that actually, it's really, really cool. It's an online PCAP analysis website. So, for example, if you couldn't get Wireshark installed on your local system for whatever reason, you could use a system like APackets to inspect the packet capture file. So if I look at, let's do explore reports here. We can take a look at some of the other dumps that people have done. So let's go to this one, sip.pcap. Okay, and so from this one, we could see that APackets is showing us that there's 22 DNS queries. There is a possibly a clue for a sniffer looking for SMB traffic to exploit. We could see some ARP information. We could take a look at the network map here, actually. Okay, so here's a visualization of what the network looks like for this particular packet capture. We could take a look at the IPs and all that good stuff. We could also see SSDP announcements, some devices that are connected specifically over Ethernet, and then obviously tangentially to that to Wi-Fi. We could also see if any images are transferred over the network. We should be able to see them. In this case, there aren't any. And then we also have SIP, which is for voice over IP, stuff like that. So super cool. right? This is a really cool resource. I think it's a little bit more powerful than Wireshark, not in the sense that you can't do these things in Wireshark, but this website actually makes it super duper easy to do it within it, right? So something to look at. And it's completely free to use. The only thing is, if you are using it for free, whenever you upload your PCAP files or your packet capture files in general, they are exposed publicly, right? So if there's sensitive information on it, it's public. Sorry. So if you want it to be private, unfortunately, you're going to need to pay for it. But yeah, super duper cool resource to look at. In addition to the second link that I have on there, which is excuse me, sorry, I burped. Which the second link on there is an official Wireshark link. These are official packet capture files that you can download, and they're actually labeled with kind of what's going on there. So if I pull this up really quickly here. So let's take a look here. So we have, for example, Bluetooth, a selection of Bluetooth, USB stuff, Cisco, DHCP. Let me see if I go towards the bottom here. Ultimate Wireshark protocols, capture file containing a wide variety of protocols. Right, super cool. Super big resource, right? You can download all of these files completely for free, open them up in Wireshark, and take a look at what's kind of going on there. It could actually maybe clue you into how some exploits are done. Okay, cool. Before we get into some of the exercises, because I know the exercises are probably gonna take us like a super long time to do to get through them. I'm probably going to leave them as exercises you can do on your own. So when these meeting notes are available on the comp channel, if you guys want to, take a look at the relevant information. Main information that I wanted to get out, though, is related to the competition. So obviously we have a lot of people here. Thank you guys for coming. Usually we don't have this many people in the meeting, so thank you guys for being able to make it out. As you guys may know, if you guys haven't been paying attention, please pay attention now. This is pretty important information. The individual games are happening this weekend, right? So very, very important. Let's go over to Cyber Skyline here. So the individual games are happening, and I would say it's as important, if not just a tiny bit less, than the team game itself. So let me get logged in here just to kind of show you guys what's going on here. Oh no, don't take my hidden password, please. Damn. Okay, there we go. Bitwarden, by the way, guys. Completely free password manager. Super cool, open source. If you guys aren't using a password manager, or if you're using your browser's built-in password manager, switch over to something like this. If you don't want Bitwarden, there's also LastPass, but that's what I used before, and they just had way too many. First of all, it wasn't free. Second of all, they had way too many data breaches. I know OnePass is also another good one. Anyways, sorry, small tangent. If you're not using a password manager, you should. You should. Okay, makes it very easy to both keep track of your passwords, but also generate powerful passwords. Okay, cool. So let's take a look at this dashboard here. Screw the AnyNote. So obviously we're past kind of the gymnasium and practice game portion here. And we're about to get into right here, Friday, October 24th, which is tomorrow, right? Today's the 23rd. So this individual game is going to be starting at 10 a.m., okay? So remember, guys, if you are able to participate, please, 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 please do try to, because the individual game is where you're actually going to be able to get the scouting report from, okay? So the scouting report, as we touched on in our first meeting, but also kind of for some of you in our one-on-one meetings, it's where you actually enumerate your individual skill, Okay, so by completing the individual game, you are going to get a report for how well you did in specific categories, specific challenges, right? What skills you have, what skills you need to work on, all that kind of stuff. And this is very, very useful, very powerful piece of information to have, not only for yourself, but for those of us, which I'm hoping is all of you, looking to very soon get into the cybersecurity landscape. Okay, so very, very, very important that you guys take a look at it and actually participate. So we could actually, I was looking at this last week and it looks like it wasn't filled out at all, but looks like now we have some information on what the individual games look like. So we have 28 questions for open source intelligence and so on and so forth. As you can see here, this enumeration and exploitation one that we're going to probably cover last has the least amount of questions because this is like, these two are like some of the most difficult topics. So yeah, just something to kind of keep in mind. So yeah, so please, please, please make an effort to participate. I believe this goes on until Sunday at 6 p.m. question mark. I wish I could, oh, maybe this, right, yeah, right here. So it starts on the 24th, which is Friday, and ends on the 26th, so Sunday. Yeah, Sunday at 6 p.m. Pacific Daylight Savings Time, okay? So 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. Make sure that you try to get as much out of it as possible, okay? Obviously, I'm going to try to do all of it. I'm going to try to just kind of crank out as much of it as I can. But, you know, life gets in the way. What can you do? But, like, seriously, guys, this is like this one of the more important things that you could do for yourselves, right? Once we get into the team game, it's going to be important for all of us as a team to participate. But for you as an individual, the individual game is going to be, you know, the single most important thing you could do for yourself. So, yeah, just something to keep in mind. And obviously, because it's happening this weekend, we haven't had time to kind of go through all of the concepts, but you could at least get an idea of, you know, what we have covered and versus what we haven't covered yet. So pretty much, I believe cryptography and forensics are stuff that we're going to cover on Saturday. So if you wanted to review that stuff on your own, it would probably help. But in terms of these last two here, right, you're kind of on your own until we kind of get to the end here. So yeah, we weren't able to prepare for all of these, so we're kind of setting ourselves up a little bit for failure in the sense that we didn't start early enough, but it's okay. I think we got a lot of progress done to prepare for like a major portion of it. And for anything that you can't do, I mean, we took a look at the exercises. Generally speaking, a lot of the exercises, you can kind of Google your way through it. Once it gets a little bit more complicated, you need to have your own, you know, knowledge of how stuff works to be able to solve it, which is where it gets a little bit complicated. But at least try to answer some of the more basic ones, even on the advanced topics here, to get as many points as possible. Okay, cool. So yeah, so make sure not to miss out this weekend to do that. If you miss out, you're not going to get penalized for it, but also, like I said, you're not going to get any sort of recognition for it as well. So keep that in mind. Okay. Any questions on? Sorry. Before I take questions, just know that we won't be talking about anything that's happening in the individual game while it's happening. So even though we're going to have our meeting on Saturday, we won't be able to talk about what's actually happening during the competition. So we're not going to talk about anything. Okay, guys, please. So don't ask like how he did X, Y, and Z because the competition is still going to be actively happening. So yeah, we're just going to kind of dodge around that. Once it's done, though, when we meet again on the week after, so next week, we'll be able to talk about it. And before we segue into the next section, let's bring that back. Any questions on NCL, particularly the individual game or in general? Any questions or comments or concerns? Okay, cool. Sounds good. So, oh, whoops, accidentally lifted the table a little bit. Okay, so this kind of sends me into the next portion that I kind of wanted to get into here, and that's going to be documentation, right? So while we are doing the individual game, it's going to be a great opportunity for you to practice documenting your experience. Now, whatever documentations you make during the course of the game or the competition in terms of the individual or team game, we can't post publicly. Okay. However, you can retain this information privately, like to yourself, or I haven't seen it explicitly disallowed, but what we're going to do at the end of the competition is I'm going to go ahead and collect all the resources that we were able to collect during the participation of this competition, and we're going to use that information for later competitions. Again, we're not going to have it publicly available. It's going to be only for the use case of our club and stuff like that. So that's the one kind of stipulation. Okay. So documentation. You may have noticed that whenever I post the meeting notes, I have them in the .md format, which is Markdown. And if you're not at all familiar with Markdown, my meeting notes are, I would say, they're a pretty good way of kind of getting a short introduction into what it's all about. But basically, Markdown is just a plain text way of visualizing information. Let me actually open this up in VS Code really quickly. Or VS Codium is what I use. Let me open up one of those. Open up file, downloads, meeting 3. Open. Okay, so take a look. So here I have VS Code open here, and so as you can see here, I have the plain text Markdown file here. But what I could also do is I could actually transform this Markdown file into a like a stylized preview. So if I click this button up here, we get a preview of more or less kind of like what the original notes kind of looked like, right on the left here. And the stylized format makes it a lot easier to read, right? So we could see that, scanning here is like the main heading, and all of these are like subheadings and stuff like that. So very, very powerful tool to use. And if you haven't used Markdown yet in any of your classes or your code bases, right, I would highly recommend whipping out a text editor right now and kind of following along with us. So, like I said, while you are doing the competition, it is in your best interest. Maybe not so much in the individual game, right? If you don't want to take notes, right, you don't have to. I'd highly recommend it, though. But when we get to the team game portion, it's going to be very, very, very important that you take notes on what you are doing, right? Because once, let's say, for example, you just can't solve the problem, okay? What you could do is you can take your notes, send them to one of the team members that's willing to take on your problem, right? And that team member is able to look at your notes, and maybe they're not able to directly solve the problem, but maybe they could at least help you out and be like, oh, hey, look, at this step, actually, you did the wrong command, or you followed the wrong step, or something like that, right? So having a real-time document where you're actually documenting everything that's happening is going to be very, very important, not only for yourself, but for the team during and after the competition. Okay, so keep that in mind. So let's get into kind of how to use Markdown, just kind of like a really, really super simple breakdown. So headings are denoted with the pound sign or the hashtag, okay? So if I have one hashtag, that's going to be the biggest heading. So if I'll just put heading 1 here. Let me set this to Markdown really quickly, just so we can get all the cool syntax highlighting. Okay, so hashtag heading 1. If I do 2 hashtags, it's going to give me a slightly smaller heading. So heading 2, and then so on and so forth for heading 3, and so on and so forth, I believe until 6. So once I get into 6, that's kind of when it stops. So if I look at the preview, we're able to kind of see what that looks like. So heading 1 is going to be the largest. Notice how heading 1 and 2 have like this underline that shows us that usually these are main topic headings. And then these other ones below are subheadings. Okay, so what's a use case for this? So for example, let's say I have in my documentation, I'm tackling open source intelligence. Okay, so this section below is going to denote everything that I did for open source intelligence, right? Next, let's say in open source intelligence, I'm doing challenge 1. Okay, and then I'm going to put, I don't know, example challenge as the name. Okay, and then I can put all the text that I want in that specific challenge, blah, blah, blah. Then I can move on to the next challenge, challenge 2, example 2, and blah, 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 blah. Okay, so hopefully you guys can see how important it is, not only in the plain text version to separate sections, but once you actually get it kind of rendered out in this format, to kind of separate stuff. Into sections, right? I'll touch on that in a second, actually. Never mind. Okay, so that's headings. Another important thing that you're going to want to know is lists. So lists are actually super duper simple, and there's a bunch of different ways you can make them. So I could do that either with the dash. So if I do dash item 1, dash item 2, dash item 3, and so on and so forth, right? You could see that I have those dots on the left side. This tells me that it is a list, okay? Another thing I could have is nested lists. There, nested lists. So if I tab this over or even space it, you could see that now I have this sub item, right? So item 3, let's do item 4. I can tab over again for item 5 here. Oops. Item 5, so on and so forth, right? So lists are very, very powerful, right? It allows you to list information. Now, dash isn't the only way to do it. You could also do it with the asterisk. So if you use asterisk instead of dash, it works exactly the same. There's actually functionally no difference between the asterisk and dash as far as I'm concerned. You could see these first 3 I made with the asterisk, and the last 2 I made with the dash. And yeah, there's nothing different. I don't think there's any other ones, though I might be misremembering. But those are the main 2. If you guys are familiar with Markdown and you know some other list markers, let me know. Otherwise, these are the main ones. You don't really necessarily need to know any other ones. It's just whichever one is more comfortable for you. Okay, so again, another use case, if I bring back that open source intelligence thing that I had earlier, if I can Control Z all the way back, boom, what I could do is I could say, okay, so let's say step 1, let's just say I launched Kali instance, and then let's just say ran ifconfig, or whatever, so on and so forth, right? So you could use list to enumerate, or sorry, maybe not step, maybe problem 1, right? You can enumerate specific stuff in a specific challenge, right? You could also put problem 1 as a subheading as well, right? So problem 1, and then we have the list here to denote kind of what happens. Obviously, it's up to your own discretion when to use headings, when to use lists, all that kind of stuff. Okay, cool. Next, so we have headings and we have lists. Another thing you're going to want to do is sometimes there's specific stuff that you kind of want to highlight. Okay, and the way that we could do that is by using the asterisk. Okay, so this is why I use the dash for list and not asterisk, because asterisks have another use case. So for example, if I have important text here, Okay, let's say I wanted to bold it or italicize it. Let's start with italicizing. Okay, what I could do is I can surround this in asterisks, right? So if I put asterisks around my important text, not only will it italicize it in the markdown, but it's also going to italicize it in the preview. Okay, if I wanted to bold it, I put another pair of asterisks. Now notice how it's bolded. Okay, and if I want to italicize and bold it, I put a third set. Okay, so notice how now it's bolded and italicized. Okay, so coming back to that example that we had earlier, right? Let's say right after ran if config, or sorry, let's just do something on purpose, right? Ran IP config, and I wanted to bold that, got error, right? So boom, so this is right where I got my problem at. And somebody reading this documentation could see, oh, okay, so this is where the problem is. Let's see, oh, you ran an instance of Linux, but you're using IP config. IP config is for Windows, and boom, you would tell that to somebody. Okay? So yeah, so that's how you bold italicize text. Pretty simple. Okay. Oops, I did not mean to delete all that. Okay, next is going to be another way of highlighting information. So sometimes you're going to want to insert kind of code blocks into your markdown document. Now, it's not necessarily code blocks. It could just be what are called callouts, and we'll see what that looks like in a second. So what does that look like? So let's say I had some text like, I don't know, def Python, return 1 + 1, just for example, right? Now, in my markdown, I have it, in the formatted way where it kind of looks like valid Python code. But when it actually gets rendered, it gets rendered as, a singular string. What I could do is I can tell Markdown that, okay, no, actually what I want to do is I want to keep this exact format. I want to print it exactly like this. In other words, I want to stylize it a certain way, right? Usually this is useful for what are called doc strings, or if you're including code snippets, or if you're just trying to make something, like artful, like a piece of ASCII art or something like that, right? Markdown could ruin it. So how do you do that? One way, select everything that you want to put in a code block and tab it over, okay? Now notice how we get this box, okay? This box is what's called a callout, okay? So it's obviously visually distinct from the rest of the document, but also it maintains the format of the original text, right? So we could see we have this new line right after the colon, and we have this tab right after return 1 + 1, and it maintains that as well. Okay, so this is one way to do it. Another way you can do it is with the triple quote. So if I have the triple quote here, and if I do def Python and then tab return 1 + 1, notice it looks exactly the same. Okay, exactly the same. Now, I generally prefer this way. I prefer this way just because I could have a piece of text that I want tabbed over, like, for example, a list, right? If I have a list tabbed over, let's just say like this, for example, it's not going to be recognized as a list. It's going to be recognized as a block of code, right? Let's say I did want this block of text to be tabbed over for whatever reason. It's just not going to work. I generally prefer using this format, not only because it's more explicit, but also this is how a lot of languages prefer doc strings to be written. So in Python, whenever you want to create a multi-line string, especially strings that explain like what a function or a class is doing, you would surround it in triple quotes. In this case, you're surrounding it with the tilde. I'm not sure if you could do single quotes. Let me see. Yeah, so you can't do single quotes. Let's try triple quotes. No, so you can't do triple double quotes. Yeah, so this one is specifically only with the tilde. So you have to press the tilde key, which is going to be below your escape key and to the left of the number 1. Okay? So keep that in mind. Now you may have saw when I was typing it with just 2 tildes, it gives me this kind of specially highlighted, not highlighted, but like specially boxed in code. This is just another way of doing another call out. Again, you don't get to keep the formatting, but at least you can kind of bring attention to like a specific form of text. Okay, cool. So let's take a look at a use case for that. So if I come back to my original document here, boom. Let's say that in challenge 2, it required me to create some basic Python program. So I don't know, created the following script, colon, and then I'm going to follow it with, I'm going to use the triple quotes. So we're just going to do def fake function, and then it's going to return, you know, megahex, whatever. Okay. So this is a use case for using callout, right? If I have a piece of code that I want to insert into my Markdown file, this is how I can do that. Okay. Cool. And generally speaking, that's going to be more or less everything that you need to know to kind of use Markdown. Oh, no, one other thing. To extend lists, another thing that we could do with lists is we could actually have numbered lists. So notice here how we have the dots. We can have numbers as well. So if I do 1, item 1, 2, item 2, and then 3, item 3, and then I can also tab over 4, item 4, or sorry, this has to be like A, for example, or not. Whoops. There we go. So yeah, we can have numbered lists as well. There might be other ways of getting different markers for the lists, like you might be able to do Roman numerals and stuff like that. I just don't remember how to do that off the top of my head. Let me just try I. Maybe it's just as simple as that. Yeah, no, it's not. That would have been funny though. So yeah, so numbered lists. Other than that, I think that's the main stuff that you should know for Markdown in terms of writing a document. I think so, yes. So anything else that you use is completely supplementary. What I'm going to do is I'm going to attach this Markdown file as a as part of the notes as well for you to keep a reference. But you could also just look up a Markdown reference. So let me just move this out of the way really quickly. You could look down Markdown reference. Okay, and we'll actually be able to see a lot more stuff that you could do with Markdown. So let's open the image here. So we talked about headers, lists. We talked about emphasis here. Italicize and bolding. Block quotes. So we saw a different way of doing it, right? Inline code right here. Stuff like that. Horizontal lines. I believe with horizontal lines it's just 3 dashes. Let me see. Yeah, there you go. See how that line appeared at the bottom there? If I do another one, it's going to do another one, so on and so forth. So yeah, there's a bunch of different stuff that you could do. There's also links and images. So I can have rich links in my Markdown file. So let me do an example here. Let's just do that example of Google. So we'll do Google, parentheses, google.com. Okay. Notice how I see Google on my Markdown document, like the formatted way, but here I can see the actual link. And if I click on it, it takes me to google.com, actually. Okay. likewise with images. Now, the only thing with images is the images have to be either hosted on the internet, right? There's some URL to it, or whenever you're exporting your Markdown document, you have to include the images as well. Otherwise, these image links are going to be broken. Okay, so generally speaking, I wouldn't recommend putting images directly into the Markdown just because it's also a little bit complicated to set up. But if you want to, it's there as well. Okay. Another thing is this escape character section. So obviously, all of these characters here have a special meaning in Markdown. So if you want to use them in your text, you're going to want to escape them with the backslash. So, oops, did not mean to do that. So if I wanted to do, for example, hashtag heading, right, but I didn't want it to be an actual heading, I would need to escape it with a backslash. Okay, so now it prints out hashtag heading. Okay, so again, the reason why I wanted to showcase this is because it's going to be very, very important to document your experience. And hopefully what we could do is we could sit down together, Roby, and kind of set up the repository. But what we could do next week is talk about how to create those Markdown documents and then how to commit them to a GitHub repository. And that way what we could do is we could have one central place where all our documentation is, so that we don't kind of have to send files. We could just say, okay, go to this link or go on my branch and stuff like that and look at my documentation, XYZ. So we'll cover that next week. At least for this week when you're doing the individual game, just try to get some practice today with Markdown. Take a look at the meeting notes that I have attached. Those are perfect examples of some practical Markdown, as well as doing stuff on your own as well. And then when you're doing the actual competition, make sure that you are writing stuff down. I'm going to be documenting stuff, so if you guys don't, we can at least look at them using my notes. I'm sure you guys are planning on doing it as well. I'm just saying, just in case. Okay, cool. Any questions on Markdown or documentation or anything related to the competition in that sense before we come back to what we were doing? Questions, comments, concerns, anything I missed out maybe? Try to be as thorough as possible. Okay. Sounds good. Sounds good. Okay then. So let's do this. So like I said, what I'm gonna do, we only have like 7 minutes left. We could probably take a look at these problems and solve them. But I don't have Wireshark on the laptop. I have to switch over to my Kali Linux instance, and I'd have to type out this whole address. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to offer these as kind of like homework just before the competition. So obviously in preparation for the competition, take a look at the resources for everything that we went over beforehand, right? Those are going to be the most kind of complete central documents that you can directly reference if you're not familiar or comfortable with the topic. And just go through the relevant exercises section. Make sure that you're kind of on top of them so that when you get to the competition, you're not kind of completely blindsided. At least you have an idea of how the stuff kind of works. And then, so make sure that you kind of go through those. They're not insanely difficult. You're probably able to get through all of the relevant exercises in like an hour's time, probably. If not all of them, maybe like a good majority. I would say like 70 to 80. Maybe don't focus on like the last ones that you have like at the bottom. Those are generally going to be a little bit harder. So I want you guys to kind of try this on your own, get some practice without my guidance. I know when we do the exercises together, I generally kind of do a walkthrough on them, but this is going to be your opportunity to do them by yourself without guidance. I mean, there is the tutorial that NCL has if you look it up yourself, but just kind of try to solve it on your own, okay? So, with that being said, any questions before we kind of disconnect for today? And I don't see you guys until Thursday, and who knows what happens. Or sorry, I don't see you guys until Saturday. Whoops, almost. I don't see you guys until Saturday, and we kind of pretend like the competition isn't happening. Okay. For sure. Okay, sounds good. Well, again, thank you guys as always for coming in. I know it's definitely a struggle to kind of sit through these and listen to me yap for 2 hours on end. It's just as difficult for me. My voice is like dying right now. I don't know if you've been hearing the voice cracks. But regardless, thank you guys for coming in, taking the time to meet with all of us today. And I wish you guys all the best in starting tomorrow, right? I'm going to be getting up bright and early. I wish you guys all the best. Hopefully you guys can do well. And hopefully I've given you some guidance, maybe not on every specific topic, but at least on during our walkthroughs, right? How you can employ a problem-solving mindset to solve problems that you're not familiar with. So I wish you guys all the best of luck. Thank you guys for coming in. I'll see you guys on Saturday. I'll stick around a little bit afterwards if you wanted to say something. Otherwise, I'll see you guys on Saturday. Bye-bye. Boom.
Deal.
Remember the program again you were using that you were showing us to take notes?
Are you talking about this one?
Yeah.
So this is VS Code, Visual Studio Code.
Okay.
You can use any text editor though. I just used VS Code because it has a built-in Markdown viewer. Oh, one thing I should have probably done is shown an online resource. You could have also, instead of downloading a specific program for doing it, you could do an online editor. Oh my gosh. So let's just go to this one, for example. And if I just open up a new file here, I can like type text or whatever, but it also gives me these tools up here to be able to format the text without knowing the specific tag. So if I wanted to superscript it, boom, or if I wanted to bold this, boom, there you go. Just some examples. So you could use this online one as well, and it allows you to save the file just like the Visual Studio Code. I just prefer Visual Studio Code just because it's directly on my computer and it's a little bit faster than using something like this because I have to actually remember the different syntax and stuff like that. But I know it's a little bit difficult to learn for first timers. So, yeah.
So OneNote is also good choice for this.
OneNote?
All right. Thank you.
Okay, no problem. See you.
See you.
Bye.
I usually use OneNote.
Does OneNote support Markdown or?